Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who know there's something detestable about all these attempts to preserve yourself. Right now, we are reading every story in the Weird Anthology, including this one, M. John Harrison's The New Rays. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in the descriptions of sickness and illness, whether that's like the bodily descriptions or the kind of like social self-awareness of sickness. It's all good. Real good stuff.
I'm Bob. I'm interested in in some of these weird stories. We get something that feels like paranoia, but because it's a weird story, it's a very reasonable paranoia. So I'm interested in that. Like everything that you expect that's going on is going on, and you have to reason with yourself. But reasoning with yourself doesn't work because you're trapped in a weird story. But I want to talk a little bit about, because M. John Harrison, this is the second story we've read by him, so I want to talk a little bit about him first. He's very interesting. He came out with his memoir, I think, a couple years ago, and Steve from Outlaw Bookseller interviewed him. He sounds great, and the first story was great. This one is very weird, very interesting, but I saw an interview that I thought was so interesting that I keep saying interesting. I need a new adjective, Zach.
Fascinating. Alluring.
Fascinating. Oh, yes.
Dazzling.
Had
a lot of razzle-dazzle in that interview.
I was going to say perplexing, but razzle-dazzle is much better. So the Times Literary Supplement, they asked him 20 questions, and this article is called 20 Questions with John Harrison. And John Harrison. And they said, what will your field, like the field of weird fiction and of fiction in general, what will it look like 20 years from now? And he just says, smaller. What does this mean? And then he goes, a generation will have grown up repelled by the urge to fantasy that lies behind fake news, corporate branding, political misdirection, sports reporting before the event, the constant fictionalization of everything. Story will be a dirty word, even at the BBC in science journalism. And at the very end, he says, it all sounds... people will be tired of anything fictional because they'll want everything true. And he says, it sounds like it could be a utopia, but utopian society on the other side of the coin is always dystopia. So it's interesting that he's saying everyone's going to be tired of anything fictional and people will stop writing. I thought that was alarming. And seeing as he writes a lot of alarming things, I wonder if he has his finger on the pulse or if he's being paranoid like the character in this story too.
Yeah, I don't know why. Whenever I look up stuff about M. John Harrison, it always brings me to these interviews that he's done. Like this one you did, 20 questions with Times Literary Supplement. But every time I click them and I watch interviews with him or read interviews by him, he always has incredible answers. It's like he just keeps really good answers in the back of his pocket. And he just lays down his cards and you're just like, God damn. So I picked out this one for the episode. The interviewer asked, you've talked about literary fiction as a genre. You've also been nominated for a number of specialist literary prizes. Do you think such prizes are valid? And he says, quite a number of novels don't sit well in their genre of origin. They have that air of distraction, of being occupied with other business. They stay with you and you wonder why. Those are the books I'd like to be writing. Now, interesting answer, but I also want to point out that he didn't even answer. He didn't even engage with the question. But it was a really good answer, books that are distracted with what they're doing, who feel like they're occupied with something else rather than just telling you a straight story. And in a strange sense, like, I don't know. I think that to me has added a new angle in which to look at literature in the future, though it's going to be fighting for space with the previous new angle, which we talked about last time, which he said was that a mark of a good story is that it is working within a genre, but then it finds what that genre is scared of and then does that. And, he's full of them, Bob. He is full of them.
He's great. Yeah. Zach, what you just said makes me think of this story, and I'm wondering if we could look at it through the lens that you just mentioned of this idea of a story being preoccupied with something, because we have a story that it kind of has an arc, but then at the same time, it feels like it's almost arc-less. It feels very preoccupied with being trapped, with being sick, and with doing anything, as you quoted at the beginning, to, I guess, escape that sickness. We have a woman who has some kind of sickness. It's unclear exactly what. She's described as having goiters, so she has kind of like a swollen lymph nodes or swollen something. She's going to see this Dr. Anderson, and Dr. Anderson is using these new rays, but he doesn't even really understand what they are. And they seem to be a different color every time. And when you're in treatment, you can't take any anesthetic. You just have a lot of extreme pain. You lose control of your bowels, and they just zap. Like at one point it's gold, at one point it's purple, at one point it's black. These rays at you. And then you're sick for a while after that, but apparently it's going to make you better somehow. At least Dr. Anderson, who talks through an interpreter, translator, is telling you. So right away, it's really hard to believe what is even going on in this hospital because it doesn't seem, one, I mean, they haven't really researched this enough. Two, everything is kind of a half lie. But our character stays there. All of these other people who are there staying there, they seem like they're getting worse and worse and worse. But our character, when she is so sick, she's like throwing up, she's kind of passing out. She goes to see him, and then we start to see these blue bodies. They're just referred to as blue bodies wandering around, and they look like mannequins, but they're blue. If you poke them, the indent of your finger will stay there for 2 or 3 minutes, and it's described as if they are plastic bags full of water. And at one point, our translator is trying to, it seems, merge with one of these blue bodies. It just strange things keep going on like this, and I'm not even sure if our character really is healed at the end. So the arc is obscure, and it, again, feels like it's obsessed with something, but I'm not quite sure what.
Yeah. And I guess maybe I would apply that to the distraction angle, because I think that like the real emotional arc of this story is the sickness, you know, the kind of chemotherapy stand-in that these new rays kind of embody. And by the way, we don't ever get like a real explanation for what these new rays are, what these blue bodies are, anything. We get almost nothing. But to me, the main emotional arc of the story plays out in how this character is going through this process, feeling dehumanized, getting more and more sick. And then it's almost like the questions of what's going on behind the scenes are the distraction. The blue bodies are the distraction. They're not the main focus of it, but they add such a, I don't know. I just came across this word. People who are watching this are going to laugh at me and be like, you idiot, but slipstream literature, which M. John Harrison is known for. Have you heard this word?
Yes, I think technically Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is slipstream. I can't even say it. That's why I avoid that word.
Oh, okay. Slippery steam. Yes.
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the telephone. Yes, anyway, it's a different.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about, Zach.
It's basically like when your SF is primarily working in a mode of like literary fiction, but then there's just enough weird to give it a kind of an unhinged atmosphere. Most people see M. John Harrison as being the kind of like platonic ideal of slipstream literature, but I don't know. I'm gonna go back to Kafka. I'm wondering how Kafka fits in on this, because when I got that description, I was like, sounds like Kafka to me, but what do I know?
He's slippery, Kafka. I'm completely wrong. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is portal literature. I just got the wrong word. And yeah, I've heard it before because Steve from Outlaw Bookseller said it, but I don't remember about what book. So yes, we have to go see what is slipstream literature and what is not.
Probably about M. John Harrison.
Probably about M. John Harrison. Yeah. The idea of the blue bodies being a distraction, being kind of like a I'm not really a red herring, but they're trying to grab your attention away from something because they're so interesting. And we kind of forget about the suffering of this story. But it also feels like the blue bodies are suffering. At the moment when the translator is trying to merge, she falls off the table as she's trying to push this blue body into her body. Her legs are kind of attached to its legs, and then she begs the woman who is in treatment, please help us push back together. And the woman's just like, oh my, what am I watching here? And just runs away. But the blue body is laying down, staring at the ceiling, and just opening and closing its mouth. And then the Dr. Anderson explains at one point, because sometimes he will speak English on purpose. He will just start speaking English. And he gets upset about our narrator's concern for the blue bodies, because she goes and like, shouldn't we be nicer to these things? Aren't these human, or what are they? And he says, matter is cheap in the universe. It is disorganized, but yearns to be of use. Do you see? We do nothing wrong when we create these blue bodies. We violate no laws. So his idea is that these things have kind of come into existence through the new rays. At least that's what our narrator kind of infers at some point. All of my treatment has created these blue bodies that now exist out in the world. But Dr. Anderson thinks, okay, these new rays, we don't know what they are. Let's use them. These blue bodies, we don't know what they are. Let's use them. So they are a distraction, but they also are suffering in their own way too.
And I think it's like fun to speculate exactly what they are, because I'm not sure, depending on what we think they are, there's almost an element of like body horror here, but it's not exactly, it's not spelled out. There's plenty of body horror in the sickness aspect, but it's kind of like an underlying, I guess there's things falling out of bodies everywhere in this story, isn't there? So, presumably the blue bodies came out of everyone in this lab. Presumably, because that one person is like, get it back in me, help me get it back in, which is crazy, a crazy scene. So it just makes you wonder, like, okay, what part of the human are these blue bodies that have now been separated? And there's no real answer. I like how you called them, like, I forget exactly what you called them, like big plastic bags filled with water or something.
That's how he describes them. Yeah.
But like the blue bodies aren't the only things that are kind of like, I don't know a better word to say other than like slipping out. I mean, her sickness is described in detail. We get this really visceral paragraph. When I got up to go, I felt odd and a bit tired. The attendant put out his hand to help me, and I was horrified to see vomit pour unexpectedly and painlessly out of my mouth all over the sleeves of his suit. I stood trembling with cold, surrounded by the sour smell of it, until they got the name of the hotel from me and put me in a taxi. So it's like, not only do you have the weirdness of the blue bodies, which are just kind of hanging around, floating around, but our point of view character's own body is in a very interesting way, like betraying her. It's doing things that she seems to have no control over. And all of it is just horrible. You know what I mean? It's all bad.
It's weird too. So she's losing control over herself as she goes through this treatment, but then they deliberately want that at the same time in the middle of the treatment. They give the people who are being shot through with these new rays, they also give them laxatives. So like they're just purging everything as they're sitting there, and they can't have any, painkiller, and they will be asked questions like, are you still conscious? Are you aware that you've lost control of your bowels? And everything is just coming out of them, tears, snot, It's interesting that these blue bodies are out and they seem to be almost aware, maybe not of themselves, but they act kind of like people, because when they escape, they will wander back into the hospital and look lost. It's almost like a soul that doesn't have really self-awareness. It's just kind of suddenly there. It's animate. It's looking. It's trying to figure things out, but it just has forgotten everything. But like you said, the translator's trying to get hers back. But our narrator tells us too that there has been more than one made of her. At least that's what she implies. She says, I will never go back to Agar Grove. That's where she is. But I see my own blue bodies, plural, everywhere. Spawned in the violence and helplessness of the treatment shed, shadows of myself cast somehow by rays that no one properly understands. They bob and gesticulate dumbly at the edge of vision. It's strange that whatever these things are, there's so many of them per person. They seem to be reproduced by the rays, or maybe people have more than one of these blue bodies in them originally, and the rays separate them. Like when you shoot a color through a prism and all of the colors shoot back out of the prism, it feels like maybe the rays are doing that. There's all these different colors of rays, and all these blue bodies are jettisoned out.
So what would you compare this story to? I mean, like, who do you feel like this specific type of weird is most aligned with who we've read before?
It feels a little bit like Bruno Schultz, because we have another character, he's visiting his father. His father's very sick, and his father's in the sanatorium, and we can't exactly tell what is true and what is not. But it also feels kind of like, who's that author? Unseen, Unfeared. The Maryland...
Frances Stevens. That's who we're looking
Stevens. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gertrude Barrow. Wait, is Frances Stevens Gertrude Barrow Bennett, right?
Yeah. Pseudonym. Pseudonymously. Okay.
That's great delivery there. So it's her pseudonym. So unseen, unfeared, where you have this weird lab where a seemingly mad scientist has discovered these germ-like creatures that are from another dimension, and they can be any size. They can actually be quite large. And when he casts this odd light into the room, they appear, and finally we can see them. They cannot touch you physically. They can't affect you mentally unless you actually look at them. And two of the characters who see them go, oh my God, our world is populated by all of these horrifying creatures that we can't see. And some of them can't even bear the idea of it. Here, it feels like this discovery of these new rays, these things we can't really trust, these things we don't really know what they're doing, but someone has decided to use them as treatment, and everyone has just lined up to go and get this treatment. And then seeing these strange side effects that are happening and using the side effects, it feels a little bit similar of this idea of, okay, where are these things? Where are they coming from? Are they from another dimension? Or should they be feared? What have we really discovered, and what is really going on besides a con artist? What is actually happening to these people?
I agree that this story has the same kind of weird and realist tensions. Slight and of course, like it's a strange thing because it's like both realist and slightly dreamlike and very atmospheric. But what this story does that those other ones can't do, I'm not faulting them for this, but this one feels set in the present day. I can imagine all of these people being like here presently with us now. Whereas as I read those stories, everyone is wearing loafers and a sports jacket, and in my mental imagination of it, it's very like 1940s, 1950s coded. It's not a knock, by the way. I'm just saying that what I like about this is I can imagine it happening today.
It also makes me think of maybe Jean Ray or some of our other stories where you are trapped in a place. She has a line where she says, places are not easy to escape from. And she's thought about leaving the hospital. She's thought about leaving her apartment and moving into the hospital. She's thought about all of these ideas of where she wants to be. I think place is very important in the weird. And it's unclear whether she's really like drawn by anything in the place. It doesn't feel like Genius Loci, where there's something supernatural that has like a magnet, an attraction to you that just keeps you stuck there. It feels like being unable to be impolite or being unable to, tell the doctor that he doesn't know what he's doing. There is a kind of almost Kafka-like, the temptation to say Kafka-esque is very strong. This Kafka, kind of bureaucratic, again, paranoia of I have to stay here even though I'm not really sure if it's the right direction for me. Something about my decision has made me stuck here. And maybe it's because my blue body has been separated from me and it's going to be wandering out alone, or maybe I need it to function. But there's a weird magnetism, again, not supernatural, but there's something about I've made a decision, I need to stay here, and I don't really know how to get out of the situation.
And, to pair with that, there's also this element of like our character sees these bureaucratic things happening, but doesn't understand them at all. Like there's that great moment where like, she gets on the table, they're strapping her in, and then they put on hazmat suits. And then it's like, suddenly it's an emergency and they're running around, everything went from like calm to like extremely hyped up and just at the drop of a hat. And it creates the effect of this is to create this feeling of confusion in the reader. Why did they do that? What are they doing? What is the danger here? None of these questions are ever answered, but it creates it's a really nice effect.
It is a nice effect. Your idea of comparing this to other stories we read in the weird, I'm realizing how good it is. This idea of the rays, it reminds me again of The Other Side by Alfred Cuban, because these things start invading the world and they are changing it fundamentally. by rotting the walls, by invading everything with animals, completely changing the order of humans and animals. So now the cities are populated with animals. Everyone becomes sleepy. Slowly, something, and we can't really tell what, layer by layer is taking over, as if that's what it took to bring one dimension into another. It has to slice it through many little frames. Here, the rays seem to be affecting the very structure of the building. She says the wall clock, so they're rotting the walls. The walls themselves are starting to become full of holes, and so light is peeking through the walls because these new rays are damaging them. And then she says the wall clock, a very delicate mechanism, stopped and had to be replaced. And when they opened it up, all its working parts were covered with a damp, furry mold. It's interesting, yeah. So it's interesting that these new rays are bringing out something from us, something from the human body or something from whatever it is that maybe is a soul, that maybe is just a copy. It's bringing something out or creating it, but it also is bringing something out or damaging or creating this mold that will eventually, presumably, completely destroy the building and replace the building with mold or with just collapse. It's interesting that these rays are introducing something new or discovering something that was already there all along. And it feels very weird in that respect, the idea of the nth dimension, the fourth dimension, coming in and interrupting our dimension.
And mold and fungus are like the quintessential weird living object, right? Like if it was just a simple moss or a lichen or a fern, you'd be like, yeah, okay, it's causing the plants to grow. No big deal, might even make the place look nice, but there's something fundamentally like other about fungus. You know what I mean? It's like it operates by strange laws that we cannot begin to understand, and it feels weird. Touches kind of like meat, looks like a plant, either kills you or makes you really, really high. Fungus.
It's among us.
And humongous. All right. Okay. Well, anything else we want to talk about in this one? There was one thing. Sickness. I felt like we've kind of been circling around this, like, what is the distraction here? But to me, this story was really about the social dynamics of being a like continually sick person. And I felt like M. John Harrison did like this really illuminating job of kind of highlighting how people's relationships with you changes in very cruel ways. Very, I don't want to say heartless, but just that feeling of being a burden to others or others making you feel as though you are a burden and the guilt that comes with that. So I got a couple things. I got a couple quotes. One of them was, I lay in bed for 3 days at the hotel, very ill and depressed, wondering if it was all worth it. To WB, I wrote, why this mania of mine to stay alive? I feel no better. I can't even go for a walk or eat a piece of cake. I hate myself for hanging on. When I caught sight of myself in the mirror, I was so thin that my shoulder blades looked like 2 plucked chicken wings. Sleeping fitfully during the day, I dreamed that I had a goiter which drained all the virtues of the world around me. Everything around me grew two-dimensional and unrealistic, with the thing on my neck fattened up like a huge purple plum. I woke up in a sweat and found myself staring out of the window at a square of sky, the color of the zinc. So like, even in her dreams, her dreams are symbolizing this feeling that she has that not only is the physical manifestation of her sickness like large and visible to everyone else, but in some ways it's fundamentally changing the world around her. It's draining the virtues of everything around her. Good use of dreams, by the way, good use of dreams to symbolize a character's perspective.
I was thinking about dreams too. In the weird, it seems like dreams are acceptable. I feel like in a lot of other fiction, people tell you to cut the dream out. It's nice that dreams are really essential to a lot of things in this. It's interesting too. She's sick. She's losing, I guess, her attachment to others. The only place that she goes that she actually enjoys is going to the cafe. And she says she can go to the cafe, buy her croissant, buy her coffee, and that's the only interaction she needs. She can sit and enjoy it. And when she goes back, everything becomes all about being sick again. So her only little she can't even escape into her dreams, as you mentioned. The only places she can go is to the croissant and the coffee.
Yeah, because as she says, in a cafe, nobody notices you at all. In your hotel, everyone can see you, but in the cafe, you're invisible. So true. So true.
Zach, I think you're right to bring it back to the kind of the most central, the human aspect of this, because it is a very touching story. It is a very sad story. It being a weird story, though, I think I want to see more of this question that this story has brought up for me. These new rays, which seems to be, almost the weird itself, this weird, what does it bring out in our reality? Does it bring something out that was already there, or does it introduce something new? And then from that, do these new things continue to proliferate on their own, or does the weird itself, by us as like a lens, like a prism, does it copy us out? I'm interested to see more how people view the weird affecting regular reality in future stories.
I think for me, I'm probably most interested to explore this idea of slipstream. If this author is the platonic ideal of it, I want to find out just how other people handle it, what other people do with this idea of injecting the kind of realist literary mode with these weird happenings, this weird background, like a background radiation of weirdness. But plenty more opportunities to find out in this anthology. I'll talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.